The night was deathly still, as Anna tucked in her children, Matteo and Lupa. She left the windows open to the cold darkness, for the house was suffocatingly heavy with dread. "Tell us about the weeping woman again," the children begged. Anna sighed, knowing the grisly tale would haunt their dreams. Long ago, in a bleak village, there lived a pale young woman named Maria, with raven hair and eyes like endless voids that pierced men's souls. Though promised to a nobleman, Maria's heart festered with desire for a rugged ranch hand named Joaquin. When Maria became heavy with Joaquin's child, her father and betrothed were consumed with rage. After the babe slid from her womb in a tide of blood, they ripped it from Maria's arms to cast into the bone-chilling river. Crazed with anguish, Maria drowned herself in those raging waters to rejoin her stolen baby. Fishermen found her body decaying along the shore, though no child was ever found. Anna's voice dropped lower. From then on, Maria's twisted spirit haunted the village, seen drifting along the riverbank drowned and weeping. They named her La Llorona, the weeping woman. Her face was that of death itself, with hollow eyes that wept blood and milky skin that hung from her bones. It said her anguished wails can be heard piercing the night, as she glides along the water seeking her lost babe. Be wary, for she will climb from the murky depths to drag you under, her ice-cold hands ripping the breath from your lungs as she keens in torment. The petrified children clutched their blankets as Anna left them in trembling silence. She paused at the open window, thinking she heard a screeching cry scrape the night air like rusted nails. With a shudder, she sealed the window against the swelling fog. Hours later, terror choked Anna as she found the children's room vacant. Their footprints led out the door into the writhing mists towards the waiting river. Anna gave chase, following the unearthly howls that curdled the blood in her veins. At the river's edge, Anna froze. Knee-deep in the swirling abyss stood a cadaverous phantom, skin stretched thin over bone. Scaly hands grasped Matteo as he thrashed against the creature's grip. Lupa already lay unmoving beneath the watery grave. "Release them," Anna pleaded into the creature's hollow pits of eyes. Only a bone-rattling shriek answered as it retreated deeper into the currents, pulling Matteo below the swirling blackness. When the pale dawn illuminated the riverbank, Anna sat unblinking, her face etched with horror. Villagers found her paralyzed with dread, lips stretched in a silent scream. For La Llorona had claimed 3 souls that night, the children's and Anna's. From then on, 2 voices cried out in twisted harmony, fused together in the weeping woman's unending refrain. And on cold nights, some claim a 3rd small voice can be heard, that of the lost babe joining its tortured mother in their woeful dirge. The sun sank below the horizon as 10-year-old Pilar pedaled her bike down the dusty road towards home on the outskirts of her village. She could feel the night air turning colder and darker by the minute. Picking up speed, Pilar rounded a corner, when suddenly a figure stepped out in front of her path. She slammed the brakes, the bike skidding to a halt. There before her stood a strange creature. It looked like a man, but had the horns and hind legs of a goat. Pilar trembled at the sight of the beastly fawn. "Hello, little one. Are you lost?" The fawn spoke in a deep, slithering voice. Pilar shook her head, rendered speechless by fear. "Don't be afraid. I want to show you something marvelous," the fawn said. He pointed to an opening in the hillside Pilar had never noticed before. A magical labyrinth lies within those caves. Pilar should have fled, but she found herself compelled by the fawn's promise of magic. Leaving her bike behind, she followed him into the shadowy cave entrance. As they walked down the passageway, Pilar heard a faint music echoing ahead, luring her forward. They entered a vast underground chamber with high ceilings that glittered with quartz crystals. Intricate tunnels branched off in every direction like a maze. The fawn led Pilar down one of the paths, the music growing louder, almost hypnotic. After numerous twists and turns, they arrived in a great cavern filled with eerie statues and fountains. The music was loudest here, pulsating through the space. Pilar gazed around in wonder, thoughts of home forgotten. "Go on, take a closer look," the fawn said. In her trance, Pilar moved toward the center of the room, but as she did, the faun's eyes began to glow red. He waved his hand, and thick tree roots burst forth to ensnare Pilar's arms and legs. She screamed and struggled, but the roots continued wrapping tighter around her body. The faun let out an evil cackle as Pilar fought helplessly against her bonds. "Foolish child, no one ever escapes my labyrinth." He vanished from sight as Pilar cried and screamed. Hours passed in hopeless darkness. Then suddenly, Pilar heard faint barking. Her old hound Bruno came bounding out of the tunnels into the cavern, sniffing wildly for her scent. "Bruno, over here, boy," she called out hoarsely. Bruno bounded to her side and immediately started gnawing at the roots and trapping her. After what seemed an eternity, Pilar finally felt the roots loosen and fall away. She threw her arms around the dog, overwhelmed with relief. Bruno guided Pilar back through the winding tunnels, his barks keeping the faun at bay. After many false turns, they emerged exhausted but free from the hellish caverns. Under the light of the full moon, Pilar and Bruno raced home. But just as the village came into view, an ominous howl split the night air. Pilar turned to see the faun standing not far behind, eyes burning with rage. "You can never escape me," he growled. Bruno barked and leaped at the faun, but the demonic beast swatted the dog away effortlessly. Bruno smacked against a boulder and fell limp to the ground. "No, Bruno," Pilar cried out. But there was no time. The faun was advancing quickly. Abandoning her fallen pet, Pilar ran faster than she'd ever run before. She dashed into her village with the faun close on her heels. Just as the beast's claws grazed her back, Pilar burst through the door of the village church. She slammed the heavy doors shut behind her, the faun pounding thunderously from outside. Pilar cowered beneath the pews as the priest performed blessings to ward off the evil presence. At last, as dawn broke, the battering at the door ceased. Cautiously, Pilar and the priest emerged to find the village streets empty once more. The faun had vanished for the day, retreating back to his dark labyrinth. But Pilar knew the faun would return again when night fell. She had escaped his lair once, but the next child lured might not be so lucky. From then on, parents kept their children locked safely indoors after sunset, for the faun was always waiting in the darkness for his next innocent victim to lead underground, never to return. The full moon cast its pale glow across the barren fields as Marta made her way home, after finishing up late in the village. As she walked down the dusty road, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her. The chilling autumn wind whipped around her, carrying what sounded like ghostly whispers. Marta glanced back nervously but saw nothing except shadows. She clutched her shawl tightly around her shoulders and quickened her pace. But then a mournful voice drifted through the air, singing in a language Marta did not recognize. Up ahead, a misty figure took shape on the path, dressed in ancient finery with jet-black hair flowing loosely past her waist. Marta froze, unable to tear her gaze away from the phantom. La Llorona, she thought fearfully. But as the specter drew nearer, Marta saw she was no weeping woman. Her face was proud yet full of sorrow, with dark, piercing eyes that peered into Marta's soul. She knew then this was no legend. She was in the presence of La Malinche, the tormented ghost of the Aztec woman, who enabled the Spanish conquest centuries before. "Help me, please," the ghostly woman spoke, her voice ethereal but tinged with pain. Marta tried to reply, but could not form words. La Malinche glided closer, reaching a hand towards Marta, who stood paralyzed. The ghost's pleading eyes bore into her. "Free me from this purgatory, I beg you." Marta finally found her voice. "How?" she stammered. La Malinche's gaze burned intensely. "Avenge the sins of my past. Avenge my people." The wind howled furiously around them. Marta's mind raced. Avenge atrocities committed centuries ago? How could she possibly help this tormented soul find peace? La Malinche drew closer still, her eerie beauty overpowering. "You must right the wrongs of history, or I will never be free of this curse." Marta trembled, yet felt herself compelled to aid this ghost. La Malinche reached out and grasped Marta's hand. An electric chill shot through her body. The spirit's grip was like ice, sending Marta's senses reeling. "You will help me settle the score," La Malinche urged, her voice taking on a sinister edge. "We will have our revenge!" Marta screamed and wrenched her hand away. La Malinche let out an unearthly shriek of rage that echoed across the fields. The mist surrounding her swirled violently like a cyclone. Marta turned and fled down the moonlit path in terror. But no matter how far she ran, La Malinche stayed right behind her, hands grasping. Marta could feel the ghost's frozen fingers clawing at her back. Up ahead, she spotted the church and made a desperate sprint for the doors. La Malinche's cries of fury pursued her every step. Marta burst through the entrance, just as the spirit's grasp snagged the nape of her neck. Inside the sanctity of the church, Marta collapsed in exhaustion. The ghostly cries of vengeance ceased. Looking up with terror, she saw ethereal hands reaching through the cracks around the door, but unable to breach the church walls. At dawn, the vicar found Marta still huddled by the door. She recounted her chilling encounter with the Aztec maiden's ghost. The vicar listened grimly, then prayed over Marta to cleanse her soul of the vengeful spirit. But each night, La Malinche returned to haunt Marta's dreams, demanding she avenge the wrongs of the past. The ghost cursed Marta for escaping her grasp at redemption. Though awake, Marta was protected. She dreaded the terror that awaited every time her eyes closed in sleep. La Malinche's spirit would not rest until history was set right, and she would torment Marta ruthlessly until the task was done. Marta feared she would never know peace again, either awake or asleep. For there was no escaping the fury of La Malinche, whose rage and anguish would haunt her forevermore.